Welcome to Coffee with the Journalist, a podcast by One Pitch, featuring well-known journalists from the top US-based publications covering technology, lifestyle and culture, health, science, and more. The goal of our show is to uncover the real person behind the real stories you love to read. We discuss their beat and news coverage, what their inbox looks like, and a whole lot more. On today's show, we're joined by Katherine Foley, a health and science reporter for Quartz. Katherine focuses on stories surrounding age-related health and aging populations, and most recently has been covering these types of stories related to COVID-19. Today, Katherine tells us about how Quartz approaches COVID-19 coverage, how she organizes pitches in her inbox, why you shouldn't pitch her personal email, her free personal newsletter, and a lot more. Let's hear from Katherine and Beck on the show today.
Hey everyone, welcome to Coffee with the Journalist. Today we have on Katherine Foley from Quartz, and I'm so excited to chat with you, Katherine, because it looks like your entire life has been COVID coverage in the last several months. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. I know we went over your background and your science background and where you've been before and all the great pieces that you've had in other publications. So right now, as we were just discussing, you're usually based in Washington, D.C., but you said you're outside right now because, we're all in quarantine. In Virginia, you're now based?
Yeah. I just needed a little bit of a break from our, it's a 1-bedroom, 1-den, and it's me and my partner and our cat, and there's only so much of that together time you can take,
That's right. Yes. Before we jump into just our usual questions, because your coverage has been so COVID related just as it relates to what is happening, how's that been reporting on such a focused area of an ever-evolving thing, i.e., how soon is this thing going to kill us, or what should I do with my social bubble?
I mean, I think you asked some really great questions right there. And I think that's how we try to direct a lot of our COVID coverage at Quartz. We're not necessarily going to be breaking news the way that the New York Times or the Washington Post or like AP or Reuters, we're not necessarily going to be breaking those stories. But our goal, I guess, as a publication is to help produce stories that will help you make decisions about how you're going to live your life during these times, but, during any time. Mm-hmm. So I think when we're deciding what we're going to do, because we have a small team, usually we start by asking ourselves, like, what would be the most valuable thing for readers to do? What kind of questions are we asking? Mm-hmm. What are our readers asking too? Because we're not that isolated from them. We're trying to figure this out too. Mm-hmm. It's been interesting to see what questions people have right now versus sometimes we were trying to hypothesize what questions people might have. And then it comes down to an issue of timing. While it is good to be ahead of these things, maybe that's not what is on the forefront of everybody's minds. And then because we've seen how much misinformation has been spreading so far, if we can tell the same story in a creative or new way that might reach some audience that words alone aren't reaching, if we choose to do an infographic or use a chart to explain something, even if we're saying the same thing as a all written story, that's great. We are happy to make information more accessible to people, mm-hmm. if that can inform the choices that they're making about how to live their lives now.
Mm-hmm. We usually go into, Katherine, the inbox and what it looks like from a journalist perspective. And I think my hypothesis is you're going to have some different responses, but maybe not. Maybe it's going to be surprising because usually journalists get tons of pitches. And this is, of course, a podcast to inform, hopefully, publicists and PR people what's going on in that inbox and how does my pitch get read. What's your inbox like these days?
Whew. Well, I would say it's tricky because I am an inbox zero kind of person.
Oh, another one.
Yeah.
There's only 10% of you, I'd say. Mm-hmm.
So usually I leave things unsorted if I mean to get back to them or need to process them fully. And I would say it's been much harder to do that. So I usually actually try to leave some time, even normal times, I would try to leave an hour or so on the weekend just to sort everything out. But these days it's especially hard because I didn't start out being a COVID reporter at all. None of us really did, other than some folks who had been focused on infectious disease for a while. So I'm still getting some of the usual pitches that I would get, you would expect me to get as a health reporter. So I still am getting some of the wellness pitches, which I almost never really pick up. That's not really my thing.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for a lot of the different advocacy groups that are reaching out and saying, like, this is how COVID is affecting our lives. This is what we are concerned about for X, Y, and Z. And I'm even more grateful for the statements from scientists who do have time to talk. I think that is definitely something we've noticed is like a lot of the people that we want to get information from are really, really busy just treating everybody, which is totally understandable.
Yeah, of course.
And then I think, it's interesting to me that people are always trying to sell stuff. That's not really something we do at Quartz, but I have been getting a lot of pitches about like, this app will help you exercise at home if you're interested, or like these cookies are like a whatever special kind of cookie that you can snack on when you're stress eating from home and they're somehow healthier. And so it is interesting to see how like the product pitches that I get change over time.
Yeah.
And now it definitely seems like they're more focused on like how to stay sane at home all the time. Normally during the summer months, I'd be getting stuff about like Lyme disease, and avoiding mosquito bites and all of that stuff.
I'm surprised you're getting product pitches for like, eat this keto cookie or something. Cause you're very science focused. And I don't know about you, but like you're very COVID focused here too.
I think sometimes with them, it's a numbers game. That's the vibe I get.
Yeah.
I will say, just because this is for PR folks, I'm always surprised by how bold some of the emails I get are. I go by my full name always. And sometimes I'll get these emails that are like, hey, Kate. And I'm like, whoa, that's really familiar of you.
Oh, what other bold things are people doing? Okay, so they shorten your name. People do that to my name too. All types of various ways, which I find, I'm like, yeah. Okay, what else? So I use my full name as my byline. So the other thing I see a lot is somebody saying like Katherine Ellen, as if that's my first name, which would be a mouthful. Mm-hmm. So I usually chuckle when I see that because it means like when I see that, I assume that it's a pitch from someone who, isn't emailing me personally, but rather is sending me a big batch. Like I'm one of a million on those. Yes. Got it. Anything else weird you see with pitches?
I mean, I do, like I said, when people like clearly haven't looked at what I cover, that is a little frustrating because it's just like time. Or if I keep getting responses to the two pitches that I have just ignored, I would say that's probably my other biggest pet peeve. It's like, nope, I'm not interested. And like, I don't want to be rude over email. I never do. I think sometimes it's more polite to say no, thank you, or just not respond at all. But occasionally when I keep getting the same, like, hey, Kate, hey, Kathy, like, just wanted to bring this to the top. It's like, so, sometimes when I get those repeated pitches, I say, actually, I'm not interested. Please take me off your list. Or I guess, well, now that we're talking, I guess the last thing is if I ever get things sent to my personal email, that's sort of a turn off just because it's not what that email address is for.
Wait, how are they even finding that?
Yeah, I do keep it like public on my personal website.
Oh, I see.
That's where I keep all of my work.
Yes.
So I do think it's important to keep out there, but I'm always like, it does take a little digging to get to. You have to be a really interested party.
By the way, let's plug your newsletter, Scrap Facts on Substack. Find it. It's right on your Twitter page too, I noticed. So everyone can sign up for that.
Yeah. Yep. It's free and it always will be.
Perfect. Even better. Because I think a lot of us are getting a lot of stuff to sign up for a lot of newsletters. And there's only so many like newsletters that I can pay. I swear I'm spending like $100 a month now just on newsletters for your $5, whatever, which I'm happy to do. But I was like, I wonder what my budget is now for newsletters.
Yeah. And I really respect a lot of the folks who keep that side hustle. I think the reason that I don't do that is because especially with COVID, things have gotten so crazy. I've really had to look at both professionally and personally, like look at the space, look at the time that I have, look at the like emotional constraints I have of just working so much. And, I think if I need to go a couple of weeks without publishing my personal newsletter, I can do that because I'm not charging anyone for it. I would feel very differently if I was.
Oh yeah. As soon as you're paying for something, expectations magically appear.
Yeah. And the whole purpose of my newsletter is that it's supposed to be a nice, fun space that's just things that I learned while reporting that like never really got to see the light of, the internet, like web page, right?
Hence Scrap Facts, just the things you find.
Yeah.
I like it. You can find it again, everybody, on your Twitter page.
Yeah.
So that's easy. Wonderful. Okay. Making a great story. So we like to talk about this too. How long and what is the process like to make a story come to life? For example, the one we were talking about before we hit record was on like the business of birth and fertility, for example, and how capital intensive it is for aspirational, let's say, parents to freeze their eggs, freeze embryos, IVF, all that stuff. And you said you were on your Twitter, and it's a pinned note here. It took you several weeks on that one to kind of probably just to research and talk to a bunch of people. So what does a story typically take? Time, etc.
That's a great question. So for the series I did on fertility, I think it was 4 or 5 stories. That took a really long time because I think I had pitched it even back in January. And to even pitch a series of that magnitude requires at least a couple of days of research. I had sort of fallen into it because I cover a lot of age-related health. And I had really been asking like, well, what's the flip side of age-related health? And that comes down to fertility and looking, we sort of looked at the different trends in fertility in developed countries. And while that's interesting, I think what's more interesting is the business that has come out of people trying to have babies, and particularly later and later in life as we're doing. And I mean, I think where I came at it and where I tried to add value was it really explaining the science behind the business, because I think there are stories that you will read about either the science before it's a final product or just an overview of the industry. But in my opinion, the science really informs sort of like the dystopian nature of the industry.
Yeah.
And I only say that because it's just such a field. It's miraculous for people when it works. And I think it's opened the door for a lot of people who would not be able to be biological parents to be biological parents, which is great. But I also think it is such a gamble, and there's so much uncertainty in the field overall. I think that it's really important to understand that before going into that. So I guess my goal was to produce something that is reliable and readers can feel like they learned from, that also isn't coming from a marketing place at all. Because, I think a lot of the information that I found out there was being presented to me by a fertility clinic. And, they obviously have a vested interest in getting people to come in. And then there's also online forums, which might not be the best. I don't want to say they're not valuable. Of course they're valuable, but when looking for like hard and fast scientific answers, they might be harder to peruse through. So that was my goal with that series. And to go back to your question, I mean, I would say it took me a good 4 weeks to research everything, and then probably a week of writing and a week of editing and polishing.
Yeah.
And that was a heavy lift. And I would say those series in general are heavier lifts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the typical case for our news stories. So like typically, they all start the same way, right? Which is a question that I pose to my editor, and she'll say, maybe tell me more and tell me more and tell me more.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think the difference with big series versus like a shorter news story is usually I can tell her enough within like a couple of check-ins over maybe like a week or so. And she'll say, okay, you've got a story there, go ahead and write. And with those longer series, it's like, no, we got to make sure we organize this from the top before moving forward.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so just to pitch a story that you want to do, and we've heard this from the editors who have been on the show. So you got to go to them, say like, hey, okay, I see this thing emerging, or I see this topic. I want to do a story on that. How quick is that typical turnaround of the green light of like, yes, absolutely do that?
I think it depends on the story, and it depends on, I think there's a big consideration of how big a lift something is going to be.
Yeah.
If I find an interesting data set that we can turn into a chart and like publish it as a chart and a couple hundred words because I already know a lot about the topic or I've reported on it before, that's going to be a green light pretty quickly. I usually have a meeting once a week with my editor where we go over a couple of ideas that I'm noodling. And then she helps me prioritize like what I should be working on first. And usually that's based on how long we assume things are going to take me to report. Because it does take time to find the right number of experts. I usually assume that for every 3 emails I send, I'll get 1 response. And then you have to set up the interview time, and then you have to talk to them, and then you have to think about how that fits into the story overall. So I would say like our meteor stories, they can take anywhere from, a full day to execute to like a couple days to a week for sure.
Ooh, that's meaty. You got to get in there.
Yeah. But, I think I would be great to sit and report stories forever, but like sometimes it's really great to have that constraint on your creativity. So it sort of forces the story to materialize as well.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that from other people too. As much as like you hate it, it's also a love thing because then it's like it's submitted, it's up, it's published, it's out the door, and you're on to your next thing.
Yeah.
And I noticed too from your LinkedIn, you're incredibly curious. So I bet you could spend months on a certain topic and just be like, oh, let me go into it and go and go and go because it's so deep, some of these topics.
Absolutely. But I think this comes back to what we were talking about earlier and what's in service to the reader. And sometimes what is service to the reader is a really deep dive on something if it hasn't been done well before. But sometimes it's also just short. Here's what you need to know. Take that as what you need and go about your day. It doesn't, not every great story has to be, 3,000 words or more.
Mm-hmm. That's very on point. That's true.
Today's interview will continue after this brief message brought to you by OnePitch. Are you curious to learn more about the unique ways OnePitch helps connect journalists with brands and sources? Head to onepitch.co for more information about how we're helping each side save time and connect more effectively. Sign up for your free account today. Now, back to today's episode.
Katherine, we love to spend a little segment here on word association.
Oh boy.
Yep. First the word that comes out of your mind. Let's do it. These are always usually interesting. Oh, and as fast as possible, because some people, I've had a few people where they're like, wait, let me think on it for 30 seconds. I'm like, no, that's not how it's supposed to go. We want to hear like first dips. Okay, are you ready?
Oh gosh, yeah, I'm nervous.
No, don't. You'll know the answers to all of them. Okay, first one, food.
Kale.
Oh, that's great. Okay, drink.
Beer.
Hobby.
Running.
COVID-19.
Pandemic.
Senior citizens.
People.
Washington, D.C.
Home.
Alzheimer's.
Mystery.
Embryos.
Life.
Public health.
Necessity.
World Health Organization.
Necessity.
Journalism.
Fun.
Pitch.
Hook.
Inbox.
Full.
There you go. Sometimes I hear from the zero inbox people, they go zero. Like it can't even get out of their mouth fast enough. It's funny. But again, you're in the rare bunch of the zero. By the way, not to get back to this, but this is valuable. So you get to zero. Do you have a filing system? I know some people like color code.
I'm all about the color coding.
Okay. So you're a color coder with folders and everything.
Yeah. I mean, I do delete the ones that don't serve me a purpose. And I also like archive the ones that are no longer relevant, but I do try to color code everything because usually like, and that has to do a lot with the nature of the stories that I'm working on. I'm almost never working on one story and then moving on to the other. I'm usually always juggling a few different things. So the color coding really helps me see like, okay, this is for a long-term project. This is usual story reporting. Okay.
How many colors do you have?
That's a great question. I have 11 that I use.
That's an advanced level. 11. All right. Okay. Next thing here. What do you read for fun, for joy, for work?
That is a great question. Like, maybe like you, I love newsletters. I think they are a wonderful form of service. If you can find someone who curates links the way that you like, it's like a lifesaver because they're doing the work for you. So I usually start my day with a couple of different newsletters. I mean, the funny thing working at Quartz, and maybe this is true for other publications, but I feel like my colleagues are publishing so many brilliant things. And in order to keep up with my beat, I don't always get to read them. So I actually really do love reading Quartz's own newsletters because I'm like, oh, that's what that person has been up to.
And you know the person. That's cool.
Yeah. So I definitely start my day with those. What am I reading in terms for fun right now? I actually just got a new book from a friend called The Summer of Jordi Perez, and that is just fun summer fiction. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, so I'm listening to, I think it's called The Vanishing Half by Britt Benning, and that's also just fiction. Let's see, on my stack of books to read, I've got Hope Jaren's The Story of More, and I am a little way through a book called The Skeleton Keys, which is all about bones. So it's a solid mix of fiction and nonfiction in there. And I actually did just order myself some comic books.
Comic books. I love it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's comic book or graphic novel or whatever, but yeah, I ordered myself some from my local bookstore because, I feel like during this time, it is just, we are all doing what we have to do to get through the day. So like,
That's right.
I got really into Avatar: The Last Airbender. This is like, I should not be admitting this on a podcast. I got really into it. And then I went to go order, like, there's a comic book that continues the story. And I was like, absolutely, I want to read this. And the woman at the bookstore was like, ma'am, these are for children. And I was like, I'm aware.
Love it. Okay. What do you think the future of journalism looks like?
That is a great question.
And maybe, are you positive, negative?
So one of my favorite things that someone ever told me was actually Bill Nye, like the science guy.
Yes.
I grew up watching his show and I adored it. Like, he was like so proud of being so nerdy. And I think I really like identified with that. And like, he made it so it was okay to be smart and curious, right?
Yeah.
So I got the chance to interview him as an adult. And I was like, what would you say now? Like, we're in such a mess right now. What do we do? What would like my childhood Bill Nye's answer be to that? And he was like, well, I think we need optimism and curiosity. And I think it's Rebecca Solnit who wrote about how optimism is very different from hope. Hope is just sort of like assuming that things will work out, but not putting effort into it. And optimism is knowing that things can work out well, but you do have to work at it. Mm-hmm. And I think when Bill Nye mentioned that, I really feel that is sort of how we have to look at journalism too, not just the state of the world. So I think we have to be curious. I think we have to pay attention to what is working for readers and what other publications are doing and what seems to be working and what we like to read. And I think that also requires us being optimistic in the sense that like we know we can find the things that continue to work too, but it is going to take work and it is going to take noticing things and taking feedback and realizing that not every idea is going to be a home run, but also that all of these tries have value, just kind of like science itself. So I love working at a digital publication for that reason. I think there's a lot of experimentation that we're able to do, especially Quartz is a fairly young publication. And so it means that we have certain things that are staples, but we can get creative in different ways. And some of my favorite stories have been these like really out there kind of creative, connecting the dots in ways that I don't know that I would have been able to at another print first publication. So I'm really hopeful. I think that like one of the challenges of being on the internet is people get bored easily and have different constraints on their time. And I'm right there with them. But I also think that if we listen to them and are humble with how we approach our job and realize that nobody has to read us, we can also figure out what makes people want to read us, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. This is the first time I've heard from your perspective, well, obviously from your perspective, but just a perspective that has to do with the creativity and the experimentation that can come in journalism as a medium in our society. And that's really cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's never a dull moment. Never a dull moment.
No. Would you then, looking back and talking to your college freshman self, say, oh, absolutely, get into this business? Would you tell yourself that?
I think so. I think I really came at journalism just wanting to marry like two things that I loved, which were like figuring out how the world worked and writing. And I would say like writing is actually one of the things I have the hardest time with as a journalist. And that's what's so great about this field, right? Is that we all bring different strengths to our storytelling. I love talking to people. I love talking to people about what they love. Scientists are excellent to talk to about what they love because they've literally dedicated years of their life to studying one specific thing. And it brings me so much joy to ask someone else about what brings them joy or what has brought them joy and fascination. So that's one of my favorite parts of the job. I would not say that I am a natural writer. I think I've gotten better with it being my profession. And I think I had like a baseline talent. Like, I'm not saying I'm bad, but I know some truly talented writers in the field.
And that's their first passion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think there's room for all kinds of reporters like that in this space. Like, it does take creativity with sourcing and with asking people the right questions, but it also takes the ability to write clearly and concisely, or even in some cases truly beautifully, right? I think we've seen a lot of really beautiful journalism come out of this terrible time, which is, I guess, one upside, I guess.
Yeah.
But coming back to this idea of like what kind of information readers need, like, yes, sometimes they do need the beautifully written 10,000 word piece by Ed Young over at The Atlantic. He's been doing some fantastic work during this time to reach, like, that's what's going to reach some audiences, right? And other audiences are going to take the more short, concise, this is what we know about the efficacy of different types of face masks or face coverings.
Mm-hmm.
So both have a lot of value, and both kinds of reporters have a lot of value.
And to that point, I think there's a bandwidth of creativity within journalism. So it's more, okay, is that it's a long form reporting? Is it more of that creative, beautiful wording? Is it the short and sweet facts, all that good stuff? So great to hear. The thing I've been mentioning too to people in this second season that we're doing, which this is the second season, compared to the first, is that the first was quite pessimistic. And the second has been the opposite, truly the opposite. It's interesting. And you're right in trend with the positive. I mean, not like jumping up and down, everything's so great, but just like this optimistic view. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, Katherine, we're now going to play our fun Mad Lib, which sometimes ends up being remarkably accurate. So we will see.
Okay.
So I'm going to read what I need and I'm going to plug it all in and then I will read it back to you. Are you ready?
Excellent. I'm ready.
Okay. General catchphrase. Any catchphrase.
The best.
The best. The best. How about the best of the best? How about a journalist scare phrase?
Let's see. I had a big error in my in all caps, and so let's say error on the line of correction. Somebody misread one of my pieces and thought I had made a mistake.
Actual error. Yeah. Okay. How about an empowering journalism buzzword?
Oh, thank you. Does that count? I always feel empowered when somebody says thank you.
Okay, that's perfect. An adjective.
Peaceful.
Part of a pitch.
Hook.
How about another adjective?
Gut-wrenching.
Gut-wrenching. Ooh, good one. Okay, another part of a pitch.
Let's see. Would that be source?
Yeah, sure. Okay, amount of time.
Amount of time? I don't know, 5 minutes ago.
Great. Another adjective.
Curious.
Okay, singular noun.
Shoe.
Okay. A topic.
Entertainment.
Then a verb ending in ing.
Let's say filing.
Okay, and then just a regular verb.
Can we say jump?
Sure.
I think these are half a mix of like journalism words and half a mix of like things I'm thinking about doing.
Perfect. Okay, we're done. Let's here we go. Are we ready?
I'm ready.
To me, journalism is the best of the best. It consists of factual errors and thank yous on the daily. If a pitch has a peaceful hook, I will absolutely respond to it. However, if a pitch has a gut-wrenching source, you can expect no reply from me. If 5 minutes goes by and you don't see an email back from me, you can just assume I am not curious about it. The best stories always have shoes and are usually about entertainment. The best way to reach me is by filing it over to me, but you can also jump it to me. I kind of like this one.
I kind of like it too.
My favorite is the gut-wrenching source.
No, I'm so worried about these sources now.
Love it. Katherine, this has been so fun. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Coffee with the Journalist featuring Katherine Foley from Quartz. If you like our show, make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and leave us a review if you've enjoyed what you've heard. To learn more about One Pitch, head to our website at onepitch.co and see the unique ways we're helping journalists and public relations professionals start great stories. We'll be back next week with an all-new guest and even more insights about the journalist you want to learn more about. Until then, start great stories.